Hi everybody, welcome to another yoga practice with me, Kate. This is a stretching sequence to open up into the glutes, the hips, a little bit into the hamstrings. This can be a continuation from the flow for your glutes practice if you'd like it, or you can just practice it in isolation as well as a warm-up or a cool down from any workout you've done in your day. So we're going to come into a supported child's pose position. So you want to have either a cushion, bolster, both. Why not have both? So we'll bring that bolster in close-ish towards the hips or the pelvis, and then a cushion on top if that feels really nice. And we'll just melt the body over, coming into a comfortable position here, supported child pose. You don't necessarily have to have the bolster if you don't want it. I love to have something comfortable to rest the body, to slow down the heart rate, and to feel the ground just gently hugging you in. So if you've been working into the flow for the glutes, and we were working with the element of water, allowing ourselves to embody the different forms that water can actually be. So whether it is ice or boiling, bubbling water, whether it is flowing smoothly and calmly or like rapids, whether it's a deep dive down or a shallow kind of surface-based experience, we can take all these different forms in whatever way it feels resonates with you. So we will, as also like a side practice, become aware of this element within our bodies as we stretch out. So just noticing, maybe you've come into this practice from moving quite quickly, maybe your heart rate is slowing down, or if you've come into this practice already relaxed, already calm, how is your breathing? Let's take a few moments to experience your breath in your body. Is it that ocean-like wave just gently lapping against the shore? Is it a regular rhythm or irregular? Can we begin to slow it down and soften? So as we gently rise out, take your time. We can shift our bolster or pillow slightly forward. We're going to take our body into a tabletop position, and we're going to come into pigeon or deer pose. So maybe just wiggle out the hips a little, maybe roll the shoulders. Just move your body freely. Now we'll guide the right knee in towards the right wrist, sliding the left leg back. And this right leg doesn't have to be parallel to the top of your mat. It can be a diagonal shape across towards the opposite hip. We don't have to always try and work into the maximum stretch. In fact, this is quite strong on your hip. So tucking it in a little bit makes it a little bit nicer as a practice. And maybe wiggle around a few moments. Now remember, if this pose is not a good pose for you, your knees need a bit more support, come into that deer shape. And we can always bring our bolster in front of the shin and rest our forearms. We can bring the weight over the knee. Wherever we might be, so whether we're in pigeon or deer, if you want that support of a bolster or a cushion, bring it in now. I like to have the cushion, the bolster just nestled gently underneath my chest. And if your hip does drop a little bit from side to side, just check in with what that feels like for you. So it might actually feel quite nice. It might be exactly where you want to stretch. It isn't wrong to have your hip drop to one side necessarily. We don't necessarily have to have completely flat pelvis. But if you're losing the stretch in the glutes, if you're losing the stretch or agitating the kneecap, then just pay attention to that when you're stretching. You also, if you find that there's a massive gap between the ground and your body, it might be that you need a cushion underneath this hip. Or if it's your back foot that feels a bit uncomfortable, you might want to tuck the toes. So have a little explore so we can settle in, feel into the stretch, and be where our body would like to go as we practice and stretch out. And then noticing the movement within the body, the stretching, the pulling, the opening. Notice what it feels like for you in this shape. Maybe there is like a sticky sort of fluid feeling. Maybe it's smooth. What does the discomfort feel like in terms of looking at it from the water element aspect? Is there a coolness or a heat? And are you diving deep into the expression of this posture, or are you staying shallow? Maybe you're kind of floating somewhere in the middle. We don't always have to go super deep into poses. We can stay somewhere a little bit higher up and notice the life that is experienced in our bodies at all the different layers. Let's gently edge out nice and steady. Take your time to come up nice and slowly. Now we'll drop onto that right hip if we aren't already. And we're going to sweep the left leg all the way over into shoelace. Now, you may want to have something underneath the sit bones so that as you're in the shoelace position, that left leg over right, you can actually cross at the knees more easily with something underneath your pelvis. This is quite a hard pose. So if you're like, what? How do I do that? You can also allow the ankle to come onto the thigh. So there's a little bit more space for your hips. It's still a nice stretch. And if either of these don't feel right for your body, you can take Baddha Konasana, butterfly pose, still either elevated on your hips. This is still an external rotation of the hips, but it's just a little bit less intense. So whichever variation you have decided to take, shoelace, slightly more open variation of shoelace, or butterfly Baddha Konasana position, you can. And you can either stay upright, which feels kind of enough for me right now, definitely enough, or you can begin to take that journey of melting in. So you can start to gently ease into a forward fold if that feels good. Remember, we're thinking about that water element aspect in our bodies. So we're gently unraveling some of the intensities that are held in our body as we stretch. And we're drawing those sensations to our awareness, our conscious awareness. So listen in. What can we feel? How are we responding to it? If we're scrunching and clenching and holding, perhaps we want to ease off a little bit. Perhaps it might feel more nourishing for our body to be a little less deep into a posture. Perhaps. So to melt into this pose, to get the benefits of the stretch, we might want to take slower approaches to the body. The vision that comes to my mind is just like melting ice sculpture as we start to soften in. All of the lines get kind of blurred. The image begins to just melt into one shape. becomes clearer. We understand more easily what we're experiencing. That might not be your experience though at all. It's just what kind of shifted into my mind. So we'll ease our body out nice and gently. Come up really slow. The underneath leg, which is your right leg, is going to extend out. Now, if you're in the butterfly shape or Baddha Konasana, just extend that right leg. Your left leg is going to go on top of either the thigh. If you want to bring it onto the shin, you can, but you might want to place a cushion so it's a little bit more comfortable. It can be a little bit uncomfortable to have your foot on your shin. If it's preferred to be out to the side, you can drop the foot to the inside of that leg. And maybe you might want to have some support underneath the knee if it feels like it's just kind of hanging out here and it needs a bit of support and it doesn't drop down towards the earth. I'm going to go for the leg onto the thigh, and we again can hop onto something if we need extra height for the hips and just maybe stay seated, or we can walk our hands forward and fold in, which feels so deliciously lovely as we're getting hamstring of that right leg, and I'm mirroring you, and we're getting the hip of the left. If you do need to pop something underneath that right knee, just make sure that there is support for the hamstring as well if it's required. And you don't have to fold in very far. Breathing nice and slowly and allowing the stretching to be enough. The actual posture, how it looks, isn't important. We are focusing on how it feels to be in this shape and what starts to shift and move. Imagining you were damming up some water, and you've dammed up this water, you've built up this pressure, and then all of a sudden you release the dam and you allow the water to flow through. This might be something we're experiencing. We've had these blockages, these tensions, these tightnesses within our body. I don't know if tightnesses is a word, but it is now. And then we just unplug that and we allow things to glide through. It might be a gentle trickle as the stretching might increase and open up, or it might be quite powerful and strong and a big force of water. Just make sure we feel safe. There's no pain, so actual sharp shooting pain in the body. We don't want to encourage that. That's our warning sign saying we've gone too far. Good, we'll very slowly start to climb back up and take your time. Really gently come all the way back up. Now, the left leg that's out to the side is going to drop to the outside of the right leg, anywhere it can go. So it can go ankle, knee, up here, whatever. And our right arm's going to wrap around that left leg, tugging it slightly towards the shoulder. And this will give you that lovely stretch into that outer hip area. Maybe you want to twist, bringing the hand behind you, and just feel that lovely stretch. You can also rock a little bit back and forward or side to side, which I find feels so good. And just feeling into this outer edge of your hip, which doesn't get an awful lot of stretching, doesn't really get an awful lot of release. So this can feel fantastic. Just keep breathing nice and slowly. Good, as we come back to the center, I'm going to pull the right foot in and the left foot in front. So we're not quite in crossed legs. If we were to cross our legs, we tuck our feet right in. So we're keeping them a little bit more box shaped so that this left leg is in front of the right shin. And if we close the knees a little bit more, we'll work a little bit deeper, but we can also keep the feet a little bit closer together, knees a bit wider. Now, again, you might find that this is enough and you're like, yep, that feels great. You can elevate up through the spine and just feel the hips. If you need cushions underneath knees just to help support, you can. Or we can fold forward. So we can come into this lovely forward fold, which Wherever your body takes you, all of our bodies will move into shapes differently, and take your time. We've got enough time to really experience just a gentle easing in. And again, coming back to that element of water, is the depth really the important bit here? Or is it the movement that's being experienced within that depth? So sometimes when we dive deep, deep down into the ocean, we can't see that much. We know there's life down there for sure, but we can't necessarily actually see anything. So maybe when we come up a little bit higher where there's light gleaming through, we get to actually see and feel much more. And then over time, as we adjust, we can dive in a little bit deeper, soften in a little bit further. We acclimatise to our environment. Maybe the intensity is more bearable when we go in slower and nurture into the stretching, as opposed to always having to go to the edge and waiting there until we sense a release. Keep checking in with your breath. Let's gently clamber back out, so take your time. And you should notice you've now got your left leg in front. So from this position, we can either sweep the right leg behind and come straight into deer or pigeon, or we can rock over onto the hands and knees, extend that right leg back into pigeon or deer. And remember, you can move around a little bit to begin with, so you can have a little explore of what's happening. Maybe you're like, yeah, I need deer this side. I want to come here this side. If you have maybe one side where you have a slightly uncomfortable knee, maybe you don't want the bolster on one side, or you prefer that you would like it. And then settle in. Wherever we are, we create that comfortable space to drop into the practice, and we breathe. There is no perfect position to be in. There is no goal with the physical posture. I want you to dive in to the sensational response, the response your physical body is having as it's stretching. And that's the practice of yoga, much more than making pretty pictures with our bodies. Much more interesting is to dive inwards to the experience in the moment that is a felt, embodied experience, as opposed to, can I make the shape? Is it in a good Instagram picture? And if we are forcing our bodies into a shape where it's like, not happy there, then we can adjust it and change it. We don't have to suffer through postures just because we think that we should be able to do them, or Billy over there is doing the pose and you're like, I want to do the same as Billy. All we've got is our experience in this moment. And it'll be unique every time we come into this pose. Just like when we step into water, a running stream, a lake, although it might feel the same, the water particles brushing past our skin are always going to be different. The evolving river or lake or stream, although it might not be obvious to the naked eye, is too changing over time. So let's again just ease our way back up. And we're going to roll onto that left hip and bring the right leg over. Remember your options. So shoelace, first option, knees cross one on top of the other. Now you can have the bolster underneath the hips to make it a little bit more accessible. You can also bring a cushion underneath the knees in front if you prefer. You can slide out that right leg a little bit more so it's kind of ankle onto thigh as opposed to knee onto knee. Or if none of these are they're like, no, Kate, no, don't make me do it. I won't, don't worry. We can butterfly or Baddha Konasana here. Even folding forward is a nice pose. It's a different feeling in the body, but it's also a nice external rotation, just a little bit less intense. Do what works for your body. It might be different from left to right. Make sure the knees are supported and not overstrained. And if you do want to start to go into a forward fold, you can. And just like water, we don't have to be stagnant. Sometimes it's nice to be still and then feel what's happening. And other times, movement might be essential for the release. So in order to release some of the tension, you might need just little movements in your body. So never feel like you have to get into a posture and stay there stuck. We can have a rhythm if that feels important for our release. Knowing that we are attuning to our experience as opposed to just sometimes copying what our teacher is telling us to do. So you don't even be like, no, okay, I want to be still. I just enjoy this one completely stable and still. Great, do that. For me, this side is definitely a little bit more agitated, so movement feels quite nice. I'm just checking back in with your breath. We're here for a couple more breaths. And nice and slowly ease your body out very gently. So your underneath leg, which is your left leg on this side, is going to extend out. Right ankle can go onto the left thigh, or again, if you want to take it lower, put a pillow, pop it on the shin. Maybe it wants to come to the inner thigh or the calf area, maybe a pillow underneath the knee in any variation. And then we can start to soften forward. Also, if you want something underneath that left knee, you can to support the hamstring. And maybe folding in is not an option on this pose. Maybe it's like, oh yeah, this was great, and you can dive in super deep. We're going to be experiencing that stretch through the hamstring as well, which, remember, our hamstrings and glutes connect together. So when we were working into our glutes and hamstrings, or if we have been working into this area, then they're going to both feel affected. And generally speaking, we tend to have very tight hamstrings, generally speaking. Sometimes we're very loose in these muscles and they need to be strengthened. And we're not just trying to achieve flexible bodies. We're trying to listen to the sensations within our bodies and maybe understand them a little bit more. What does flexibility on its own actually achieve? Functional mobility, when we think about how we can move in our everyday life, is much more beneficial for us and much more sustainable. And if you are a very, very flexible person and these poses do absolutely nothing for you, then you possibly don't really need to do them, or you can invite a different focus. So focusing on how the pose might affect you on an emotional level, or a mental level. So although it's a stretching practice, it's not just about stretching, hopefully. We experience the body in these poses. We listen to what is rising up to the surface and floating in our awareness. Now let's come back out gently. We'll drop that right foot to the outside of the left leg, anywhere it wants to go, and wrap the left arm around the right leg. It can be hand, doesn't have to be elbow, and we can tug it in. So you'll get a nice stretch down this outer edge of the hip. Just be gentle, because all our hips are designed differently. Even left to right might feel a bit different. So just create some space here to get that stretch. Maybe twisting round and feeling into it a little bit more. Maybe rocking. I love to rock and roll. I'm so not rock and roll at all. But we can pretend, yeah? For a moment in this position, we can pretend that Kate is super rock and roll and you're with me with that. Or it can just be very gentle and kind of yummy. Listen into your own body and experience this position how you would like to experience it today. Good. As we come back to the center, we're going to pull the left leg in and the right leg's going to go in front. So back to that kind of square crossed legs. So it's not quite fire log if you've practiced fire log. If you do want to do fire log, by all means you can go for it, but this is a little bit less intense on the hips and gets nicely into the glutes. Now, if you decide that you want to stack pillows underneath your knees, you can, or if you're just sitting upright and you're like, oh, this is enough, feel enough, you can. Even hop yourself up onto a cushion or a bolster can be really good. Or we can melt into this one. And one side might feel very unique compared to the other. We're not symmetrical. So there might be a lot more happening on one hip or one glute. And it's just that kind of going, oh, this is interesting. Being curious with your body as opposed to critical. And less, giving yourself less, does not mean worse. So remember when we were talking about the shallows in the water? Think of all the life, all the coral, the fish in the shallows, where it's warmer, safer. We can experience all that life on a shallower sensation. Perhaps the depth is just too intense to go. And you might think the opposite. Well, when I go deeper, I feel more. Sure. But we want to be careful the amount that we're actually experiencing, the amount that we're actually feeling. When it gets too intense, we might be having coping mechanisms to either avoid that or just lump it all as one discomfort. When we are able to manage all the sensations, we can see all the little details rather than just, ouch, this hurts. We notice the pulling, the aching, the twinging, the tingling. So just be where it is manageable for your body. And gradually you might find that as a byproduct, you actually go in deeper anyway. And the depth is going to look different for all of us. So we'll ease out slowly. Take your time to come up gently. And we can lengthen our legs out in front. Maybe just give them a little bit of a wiggle, a bit of a release, those lovely hips. And we'll come and lie down on our backs. You might want to have a bolster underneath your knees. You might want to wrap yourself up in a blanket. especially if it's chilly and you're feeling a bit cold. Our bodies do cool down really, really fast. And we get to relax here together for a few minutes, a few moments. You can stay here for as long as you need, maybe pausing the video and just listening to when you're ready to come out of Shavasana. Or in a few minutes' time, I'll guide you out of this stillness and we can close our practice together. So if you want to stay here for longer, please do. Listen to your own body's needs. If you're ready to come out of Shavasana, start to focus on that wave-like breath just washing through your body. Notice the areas of your body that maybe feel resistant to move. The areas that might feel tired or heavy. The areas perhaps ready to move that might feel agitated or restless, cold. And then start to move. Maybe stretching, yawning if you need it. Maybe a big sigh. We can guide our knees in towards the center of the body and rock a little bit from side to side. Maybe allowing ourselves just to drop to one side slowly. As you ease your body up gently to seated, we'll close off our practice together. Taking one final stretch, the arms will reach up to the sky, the palms will connect together, and exhale the hands down towards the heart center. Thanking yourself for your practice today, for embodying the element of water. Namaste. Thank you for joining me, and I look forward to practicing with you again soon.